How did it feel?
When it rains, it pours.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's true.
Oh,
I
dear.
think I remember back when I was going to college and I graduated and I thought, there, I've done it, right? I've finished the race. And then I figured out, no, you just started
You
it.
just started, yeah.
Yeah.
They handed you the baton again, Greg.
Yeah. Mhm. Everybody else in the line stepped back one step. I didn't notice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a grandfather used to, never even thought about it until right now when you brought, but he used to bring it up all the time that your work is never done.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's also when you got married, you thought that was it. We're good now, but something you got to work on every day. All right, let's see. What is the toughest part of seeking a raise? The asking the amount, waiting for an answer. Whenever you had to do that, anything related to that?
Well, that's an interesting group to ask that question to.
Yeah, nobody's.
Well, I can tell you, when I went and asked my wife for a raise, I knew what the answer was before I ever asked the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Especially if she said, "Oh, you want to trade jobs?"
Mhm.
She said,
Well-
I can give you a raise, but I'm going to add a lot more work to you. I was like, I'm out. I'm
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
I think the difference in the kids' generation now is they change jobs. Right?
Yeah.
A lot more, that thought rarely crossed my mind, but my kids are always looking.
Yeah, and that's true. Well, I think too, part of it is the companies don't do as much to build
Yeah.
loyalty as they
Yeah.
did before. I mean,
Yeah.
And there's some very bad managers out there.
oh, no kidding. Yeah.
Mhm.
Nobody leaves a job, they leave a manager.
Right.
Yeah. So Rick is still in down in Florida somewhere, I think. So in the present scripture, a serious problem confronted the Jews. A decree of extermination had been issued against them. Every Jew throughout the Persian Empire was to be slaughtered, wiped off the face of the earth. In the former chapter, Queen Esther had just informed King Xerxes of the plot to exterminate the Jews, a plot that had been schemed by the Prime Minister Haman. Filled with extreme prejudice and bitter hatred toward the Jews, Haman had led King Xerxes to issue the decree of extermination. When Esther exposed the plot, Haman was immediately executed. And although Esther and Mordecai were safe now under the protection of the king, all the remaining Jews were still doomed. The decree of extermination was irrevocable. So unless Esther could intercede before the king and lead him to put an end to the evil plot, there was no hope. Intercession was the answer to save the Jews, and intercession is the answer to protect us from the threats and evil of this world. This is the desperate intercession of Esther for the deliverance of the Jews, a picture being delivered through prayer. All right, Steve, I think there's 2 pages.
That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. If it pleases the king, she said, and if he regards me with favor, and he thinks it is right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, Let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, because Haman attacked the Jews. I have given his estate to Esther, and they have hanged him on the gallows. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. At once the royal secretaries were summoned. On the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan, they wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses especially bred for the king. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder their property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers, riding the royal horses, raced out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. Mordecai left the king's presence wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fears of the Jews had seized them.
Okay, any initial thoughts, comments?
Do you think the
My-
Jews have... Go ahead, Greg.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you think the Jews abused their power?
I don't know.
The thing that struck me is why is the whole world going out after the Jews? I mean, it's like maybe it's a perspective of the Bible, but it seems like they're always being conquered and taken over and beat
Persecuted.
down,
Yep.
persecuted. So what is it they do that pisses everybody off?
In fact, they were labeled the chosen ones.
I
Who knows?
yeah, I mean, it's not like they wear that on their head. It's
No.
No, they do wear
No,
the
it's just-
commandments.
Yeah.
Hasidic Jews.
People jealous.
Well, you got to think.
well, in this case, they're conquered people within a kingdom.
Right.
Why would you be jealous of them?
Right.
The other thing that struck me is that if the first edict was to kill them, the second edict was they can defend themselves. Like, why wouldn't they think they could defend themselves anyway?
Because well, there's some questions on I do have a thing that we'll talk about the difference between those two edicts or similarities, because there is the NIV treated verse 11 differently than some of the other translations. So, some of these initial questions are just more about the events, and I'll try and bring in some of the more theological implications. But I think, Greg, that's a good question. I mean, you have to think too, why are Christians more called out on things in the world also than other religions. When if you look at the stance that certain religions have regarding homosexuality and some of the other issues that the culture is, Christianity is the main one called out as being against those things. And but Islam and some of the others that have much more strict
Radical responses. Yeah.
Yes. So, but I think it all basically ties into the people that are tied to God, the one true way, which I would include the Jews in that. Satan's got it out for us, both the Christians and the Jews, and that's how he's working through people to do his evil. So,
it really doesn't have anything to do with who has the most money or the most power. It's the fact that the Jews really believe, their belief stemmed from what you're just talking about, Dwight, is they believed in theocracy, whereas you had aristocracy, you had the kings and queens and democracy, and if you go our lives, socialism. I mean, you go down through even in the debates the other night, your good friend from Indiana was talking about how he is a Christian, but when you start quoting what you need to follow, whether it be abortion, not abortion, or abortion, or whatever, theocracy tells us exactly what to do. Whereas with the other areas, it's on the human side, as whoever's in charge, they decide by their courts and make judgments on their own through the law.
yeah. So some of these questions, as we get into it, we can take them off different angles, but most of them are just questions about what's happening in the passage. Can you think of any other time a Jew or Israelite, although usually much despised in foreign countries, enslaved, was promoted to second in command?
Joseph.
Yeah. Oh, I just remind. I was thinking. I'm going to say Sunday school. Rachel took Gus and Margaret to church at ZPC, I think, and so at ZPC typically at about after the songs and everything in the service, and they take the kids back to Sunday school. So Gus had never been before, but he went, and then Susan was talking to him. We talked to him the next day about how was that, and she said, "Well, you're a big boy. You went back there by yourself without your mom." And she said, "Was it fun or was it scary?" And then he goes, "It was both fun and scary." And then so they learned about Goliath.
Oh.
And he came back with a little slingshot. So then later, I thought, sometime later Sunday or something, and Gus was playing David and Goliath with Craig, his father, and Craig said, "I'm Goliath, and I'm going to beat you." And Gus said, "No, you're not. I have God on my side." So I guess he got the point of the lesson.
Yep.
So why is it still difficult and even dangerous for Esther to make a second request of the king? Remember why she was nervous even when she was going to try and have a meal with him?
Yeah, because it has to be at his request, not her request, right? Otherwise she could be executed.
Right. Yep. Although Haman is gone, his evil decree still stands. What is Esther's plea?
Overrule the current edict.
Yeah, she wants him to end that plan or stop it. So how did the king respond to Esther's request in verse Oh, 4. Well, he just extended the golden scepter, or that she had favor, she could come forward.
You need to underline these, Dwight.
Yeah, I do.
Help us out.
Yeah, you'll see I got off on a tangent on this. They'll come up shortly. But so how did the king assure that his second edict would not be revoked? So here it is. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews as seems best to you. So he's telling that to Esther and Mordecai. And seal with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. Which is why they couldn't.
So again, does the king have any idea what they're writing?
Well, here he doesn't. He just says, "Here, you got
Because
my
I think he
signet
did
ring."
the same. He did the same thing with Haman,
Yeah,
right? So, yeah, it's strange king, right? Go right at whatever you want and seal it as if I'm saying it.
yes.
So the first decree was not sealed.
I thought it was. I thought he had
No, I think
Haman had the
he
king,
gave Haman the
ring.
Yeah, Haman has the ring. He can seal it.
So he sealed it.
Yeah, it's
Right.
just using the king's ring, so it says it's the king's, edict. It's just very strange.
Well, if you think about it, in our government, we give our ring of authority to Congress.
To incompetent people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know what they're doing, and we haven't read any of these laws.
Yeah.
And it's sad because they don't know what they're doing either.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
what was the one? Go ahead.
We'll know what it says when we read it, or after we sign it.
Yeah,
that's
1,200
that-
pages,
yeah.
right? You have 3 hours to review this 1,200 page document and sign it into law.
Right.
Like, what in the world?
Yeah.
So the other thing that's confusing about this is that the king's orders can't be revoked. Yet this is revoking the king's order,
Right.
essentially. Although it is kind of craftily revoking the king's order, and maybe that's
Yeah.
So do they really believe this, or can this be reversed because it just was?
well, but I don't think it was actually reversed. I think the only thing he said was you can defend yourself, which again,
Yeah.
I don't know why that would keep every Jew safe, because some Jews would be in a situation where they can't defend themselves.
Mhm.
They don't have what they need to defend themselves.
Yeah. Hold that thought as we go through this a little further. So,
Holding.
okay. So there's been, I mean, through this story, and I think it depends on the commentary or something you read, or what my feel is just what the leaning is of the people that are commenting, or that's writing, revising the text, if you will, or something. The Jews, of course, some of the very strict Jews want to basically say that it was Mordecai that did all the work and had the faith to proceed, basically because they didn't believe women would be have such an honor or distinction, I guess. So here Mordecai was involved in kind of a writing or designing the response, or whatever the new law would be.
So how many copies did they have to make? Pre-invention of the copier.
Yeah, and they had not only that,
And
it
then
was
translation.
Yeah.
multiple different languages.
Right.
So, so here we go ahead.
No, if you've ever worked globally, you know how difficult it is to create a message to different cultures that will be translated the same way.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Okay, I think I got my slides out of order here, but yeah, let me go. Wait. Okay. What differences did he see between Haman's original decree? Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. And the one written by Mordecai says, the king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. So most of the commentators have a problem with the NIV translation of verse 8:11. So what differences and similarities do you see between these two versions?
Well, one is an edict to kill, and the other one is an edict to defend yourself.
Right. So the big discussion becomes, so the literary structure of this, and I'm going to pull a slide from a couple weeks ago, of reversals, is operates throughout the book. And if you remember this, the structure of reversals in Esther, the king gives Haman his ring, the king gives Mordecai the same ring. Haman summons the king's scribes. Mordecai summons the king's scribes. So it's reversed. It's the letters written, sealed with the ring. Letters written, sealed with the same ring. The Jews, even women and children, to be killed in one day. The enemies, even women and children, to be killed on one day. So,
But the on one day doesn't exist in 8:11. It follows up though with that.
right, but then it also, there is a difference. Kill and annihilate all the Jews, and so in killing and annihilating all the Jews, young and old, women and little children. Here it says, kill and annihilate. Thanks. Any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children. So it's tempered, it seems like, and they still get to plunder the property of their enemies. So the discussion was between the commentaries is that the NIV, and I checked several other translations, some of them do not, they kind of temper Mordecai's thing because they thought if it was exactly the same, it's a little too violent, and why would God want to, kill the women and children? And then they got off on the discussion, and we've probably talked about this before too, on different things on why in the Old Testament, when God, the people, the culture was evil and everything else, while God would say, go wipe everybody out. So they, even women and little children. So
what is the difference in the NIV versus the others? Because to me, it still sounds pretty. I mean, destroy, kill, and annihilate still pretty.
Yeah. No, use the same word. Well, but then they well, let me show you. This is the again, this is comparing Haman's decree in the NIV. Wait, I got it? Oh, there it is. Okay. So in the New King James Version, by these letters, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together in lies to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women and to plunder their possessions.
They look the same to me.
Well, like I said, there was the commentaries were well, and one main commentary he quoted a number of different other writers or interpreters of scripture and some other translations that said, this in the NIV is not the same. It just modifies it enough to make it doesn't seem so cruel, or make it more an interpretation of. They talked about maybe how the New Testament was more the focus, and the way God handles things now is more the focus or the leaning of the NIV and some of the others. It was not as brutal as Haman's. Anyway, that was discussion that everybody was having at 1 a.m.
So yeah, this is.
So
Go ahead.
go ahead, Steve.
I mean, it's an interesting decree because, okay, so it's repetitive, right? So every year on the 13th day, the 12th month, the month of Adar, the people in the kingdom are commanded to do this by the king, right?
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's not a you may, it is you will,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's 1 day a year, every year.
Well, there's a movie like that too, wasn't it? I never saw it because it's pretty violent.
Groundhog Day.
No, that wasn't Groundhog Day. It was a much more violent movie, but it was that.
So what happens if you don't follow a king's decree?
Well, I'm
Are
sure
you are you put to death for not following the decree? Because on the 14th, all these non-Jews are going to be killed.
I don't read the first decree as you need to do
You
this
have
every
to?
year. Well, no, I
Okay.
read it as it's a decree, so you have to do it. But I don't read it as you have to do it every year.
So it's just a one day
on
event
this day. Yeah,
Okay.
on this day is when you
of
do
this
it.
year. Okay.
The problem I have is, why wouldn't the Jews defend themselves anyway? I mean, they're going to get killed if they don't. What's
Well, I mean, because there's no. That was the objective. I mean, why didn't the Jews defend themselves? And
Well, maybe there's a
Germany.
decree that's underlying that does not allow them to assemble. Well, then you couldn't. Well, that's the same problem then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, I don't see where this would have scared the attackers enough not to come, because the attackers would assume that the Jews would try to defend themselves anyway, since the date that it's going to happen is clearly this date right here. So
Right.
you might want to plan, sharpen your sickles.
But they were conquered people. They were living in the Persian Empire as the conquered people. So they may have thought they didn't have any rights. There might have been some laws or something regarding.
So were the Filipinos against the Japanese, and the Japanese took all their weapons, and the Filipinos created karate, and then they used farm weapons and ultimately defended themselves.
Yeah, why wouldn't the Jews do that as a matter of course? Why did somebody have to tell them?
Right.
Exactly.
Because they're sheep.
Yes. All right. So yeah, I don't know why I didn't bring this up. Yeah, it was a moral problem for many translators and commentators, and we will see how this plays out. The second edict in chapter 9, and we just talked about the big difference between King James in verse 11 and verse 13. So. Oh, no, I need to go back up here. Excuse me. Okay. So we just talked about how Mordecai ensured that all Jews would be able to protect themselves. So the implication is that they were not able to defend themselves with the original edict. I think that's what the point of that was. So it's interesting to get down here in verse 17. It says, "For the Jews is a time of happiness, joy, and gladness and honor, because they could now defend themselves." With the implication, again, I think, from all the celebration about that, is that before they couldn't do that. So in every province and in every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because of fear of what the Jews would do to them. So I thought that was kind of interesting
Yeah.
too. So, and again, I said without TV or the internet, many of the people did not really know what was going on based on what they saw happening. And they may have forgotten Haman's decree, or may not have gotten to them, but because it looks like Mordecai was very meticulous in making sure that the word got out to everybody about the new edict. So just kind of curious that they said, "Oh, well, I'm going to become a Jew," then.
How close was this edict to the date that they were going to be killed?
I don't know. I think it was several months out still, because when Esther found, like, it was on the edict came out in March, and the day that they were supposed to do it was not until the February after that March. So they had like 11 months to prepare, as you said, to defend themselves if they were going to do that. But the indication here is that they couldn't. So this edict comes out, and it says basically on the day that that's supposed to be implemented, that the Jews can defend themselves.
I would assume that the people that are responsible in government for those provinces would be able to hold these two up and read between the lines on what it means, right? That we're basically repealing the previous edict without specifically repealing this previous edict, right?
Right.
So they would have been used to this kind of stuff.
Probably, right?
Yeah.
Whoops. I didn't really mean to say that. Let me figure it out.
Yeah.
You wonder if they're saying, "Oh, there goes old Joe again."
Yeah.
Yeah.
King Xerxes had too much to drink again.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that's an obvious question. Do you think that was a sincere conversion? The non-Jews that became Jews? You have to wonder too. I mean, if they just said, "Well, we're going to become Jews," did they realize
You gotta get circumcised.
Yeah,
had to be
yeah.
circumcised?
Yeah,
I mean,
get in line.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an all-in commitment.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, you remember, we talked about that story. What was the one back where? Well, it was one of Joseph's sisters or something. That got raped by this one guy in a neighboring town, and he actually wanted to marry her. And the Jews, I think one of his I can't remember the names. It's difficult getting old, my memories. But anyway, so they said they were pissed. They wanted to go kill all those people, but they didn't immediately. But they said, okay, if you have to become a Jew, you have to get circumcised. So all the men have to be circumcised. So people went through and they circumcised all the men, and while they were sitting there with a bag of frozen
peas.
peas. Yeah, and they came through and killed him. So, so they didn't know what they were doing, I guess. So, okay, so this we did this. I got these. I got to move these slides around, I guess. Wait, do I have? Wait, let's see. Okay. So some of these questions we can answer or not. I can move on. I've got some things to think about that added. So there's yeah, the Jews. Oh, here it says Jews had 9 months to prepare their defense. What could you accomplish in the next 9 months? And this is for you to think about, I guess, that would put your life in better order. What part of that reordering will you do this month? So that's if the rules of the game are switched on you at halftime, how do you react? Cry foul, suit up for battle anyway. If you can't fight them, join them. One of you faced such a dilemma as the people in Xerxes' kingdom.
It's like the book "Somebody Moved My Cheese."
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people will change quickly, and some people will never change. Yeah. They'll continue to follow the old rule.
Nothing's more I don't know what you want to, frustrating than an official that decides to call the second half different than the first half. For anyone that's ever played sports.
Yeah.
What the way you react to the good things in your life, give honor to God and convert anyone to the Christian faith. Which, again, whether that's what happened with the Jews. So there's some things that throughout this, I think this brings up one of the things that how this ties into current day. And so as I read this, if you got some comments. From the beginning of time, God's war has been against sin and evil. It's easy to think wrongly of sin and evil as being abstractions apart from people. We seem to want God to destroy sin and evil, but leave people alone. However, sin and evil do not exist apart from beings who sin and beings who do evil, whether angelic or human. Sin entered the world when Adam and Eve aligned themselves against God. Because of their separation from God, he pronounced his irrevocable decree of death. So this is kind of tie into the story against them and all their descendants. The nature of sin, singular, is opposition to God, expressed as disobedience to his revealed will. Various sins. Because we are all sinners and evildoers, we all have God's irrevocable decree of death on us, like King Xerxes or Haman's. God could have justly destroyed the earth and everyone on it. For none of us is good by God's high standards. Instead, he chose to issue a counter decree to redeem people out of sin and into righteousness, removing them from the realm of his destruction to the realm of deliverance. So I thought that was interesting how the commentary was talking about this tie into Esther.
Well, he did kind of destroy the earth with the flood, right? Kind of a reboot.
Yeah.
And
well,
he tried it. He tried it once.
So is it irrevocable decree of death? I mean, that's still in effect today.
Right.
So God's counter. So God is a counter decree. So again, this is tying it into the Esther story. In Esther, the irrevocable decree of death and the counter decree of life both issue from one and the same authority, the king's signet ring, sealed both. There's been much discussion in the commentaries whether it is historically true that the laws of Persian kings were irrevocable, since there is no extra Bible attestation in Herodias or other sources of this practice. But however, it's not unreasonable for a monarch to refuse to rescind a law once publicly issued. For in doing so, he would lose faith and it would undermine his authority. So even if the author is using poetic license by introducing the element of irrevocability, perhaps he is making a theological point about human destiny. Just as Xerxes, king of Persia, could not simply rescind the first decree of death, God, king of the universe, cannot simply rescind the decree of death pronounced in the Garden of Eden against humanity. Instead, he issues a counter decree of life, the gospel of Christ. Because God did not simply rescind the curse of death on humanity, his counter decree of redemption necessarily resulted in the incarnation of his son and in that son's death on the cross. The counter decree of life was initiated in history long ago when Yahweh chose a people out of all the nations on earth through which he would achieve his purpose of redemption. He set aside a place for his redeemed people to live in peace and security. But it was a land already populated with wicked and sinful people. As he sent his people, ancient Israel, into the land, he promised to make a place for them, which necessarily meant destroying the wicked population already occupying the land. But then he cautioned Israel that the reason why they were receiving the land was not because of their righteousness, but because of his grace. The Lord, there was something after that. What was it? Oh, maybe I'll add it.
Was that in Deuteronomy again?
Maybe. I'll see. Oh. Yeah, maybe I'll look up Deuteronomy 8:9 or somebody have that open. Let's see.
If you ever forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and worship and bow down to them, I testify against you that you will surely be destroyed. Like the nations of the Lord destroyed before you, so you will be destroyed for not obeying the Lord your God. That sounds like a warning.
Yeah. Huh. All right. Well, I guess that's because I only had that much space on there to put that in. So any thoughts on that? On the irrevocable laws of God, or decrees?
Just an interesting parallel they drew here.
Yeah. Yeah. So the one commentary does a lot on, and I think I shared that on the early on about the king, and although they use the King Xerxes and the way his throne room and that type of thing is something similar, although quite a bit unholy to the way God. But the fact that, and we talked about this, is that in order to enter the presence of the king, you had to find favor with him, and he had to point his scepter towards you, indicating you found favor, and then you could enter his presence. And so that's kind of like we can't just walk into God's kingdom without having found his favor through accepting Christ his son, who paid the death and penalty for us. So any other thoughts or comments on this or the passage? None.
It just is I mean, we talked about this, but it's just a weird method or mechanism that they get to say that the original decree doesn't get executed by saying something that I think would have naturally happened anyway. I mean, if someone attacked my family, I would fight, and it wouldn't matter whether I could win or not. I would fight. And if I knew when they were going to attack, I would prepare, whether I was supposed to prepare or not. So
Yeah. Well, again, I don't know. We don't have a perspective of what it's like to live in a totalitarian regime, and not be
Well, let me
the,
explain it to you.
but I mean, if they, why they didn't, well, they tried to it several times, rebel, but,
Well, what I would do is I would put my adversaries in jail and tie up their resources, and that's what I would do.
so there is a lot of similarities between this.
Isn't there? Aren't there a lot of similarities?
And then bring COVID back to keep everyone occupied.
Yeah, yeah.
So as I said in the email, it's probably going to be a COVID or emergency shutdown to the environment because of the environment. Everybody has to stay home to save the world. So, and you can vote by mail in.
Yeah.
We'll mention Leah that she's got CF. She did have a heart attack, and that was took her by an ambulance to the hospital. And she looked so bad when I FaceTimed with her the first day. I mean, she looked like a little old lady almost. So it was, it was scary. She was getting almost 100% oxygen, and so I've been talking to her every day, and so they went in this week and pumped all the shit out of her lungs, and so today, I mean, she had initially when I saw her, she had a big oxygen thing. I mean, the tubes were big around, but now she's down to just 1 liter of oxygen and has one of those smaller oxygen things right under your nose. In fact, at 1 liter of oxygen, I throw my CPAP, I take 3 liters of oxygen at night. So that are fed. So she's doing a lot better. So hopefully she's not going to be in the hospital much longer. And
I was reading your update, and the duration in the hospitals, it seemed that's a long time to be in a hospital.
Right.
Yeah. So I think they're doing her percussion or the vest or whatever that she does and all that. But so I mean, we had all kinds of concerns initially. It wasn't the hospital where CF clinic was, so we weren't sure that they knew what they were doing. So it was pretty scary there for a while. But thanks for your prayers, and I believe again that God is what has sustained her past every life expectancy limit they had on her in the past. But
did they think that she had a heart attack because of her low oxygen level?
Yeah, that was it. She's had trouble breathing, and so she was straining so much. So
okay.
So they're doing some other tests on her heart. I think she's supposed to do a stress test before she leaves, and so anyway, that's good. And I think also my youngest grandbaby was in Peyton Manning Emergency Hospital overnight, and then was back to the doctor a day or so afterward. But he's doing much better too. So I'm just
good to hear that.
Prayers are so they're effective. I don't know what you guys think, but yeah, God does still answer prayer. So do we have any other updates or on what's going on?
So Anna's infusion was yesterday. It was an interesting progression. She called Wednesday, and you could tell she was anxious, right?
Yeah.
And I reminded her that you guys were praying for her, and then my other Bible study was praying for her, and Diane's Bible study was praying for her. And of course it helps because she knows a lot of you, so it's very personal to her. And she tells me all the time that she feels those prayers. She knows when you are thinking of her. And so thank you. I appreciate it. And through all of this, you always kind of wonder, what is the lesson? And, you know, I think she sees God very, very clearly in all these things. And then yesterday morning, we FaceTimed with her when she started her process. And it's about an 8-hour ordeal to get this infusion, because they give her a bunch of free medications and they fill her up with saline and you know, other drugs to help make sure she doesn't reject this. And so when we saw her, you know, you can hardly recognize her. She's so swollen up and she's very, very tired, but it was good to see her.
Right.
And then at the end of the day, last night she called me, it was about 10:30 our time, and she's walking the dog. You know, I'm going, oh, I'm glad you're feeling better. She goes, yeah, I'm a little tired. I go, yeah, don't overdo it. Because you got to realize, walking the dog in San Francisco is not like walking the dog in Indiana.
No, not at all.
You're going up, you know, 45-degree hills and stuff. So, yeah, it's, you know, for me and Diane, it's just this roller coaster because you're not there, right?
Yeah.
But God is there. And what more could she need?
Yeah. It's
Well, the update on Dick, you know, he was rushed to the hospital. It was determined that he did not have another stroke, but he had a very serious UTI
Oh,
infection. And that was the problem, and developed sepsis,
Oh,
which is not good.
no.
But they're working through that now. According to Carol, they seem to have that pretty much under control now, but he's still in the hospital and probably remain there for a while yet to make sure everything is going the way it should. But that was a tough.
They're real excited about the fact that he needs rehab again.
Correct.
And they're real excited because he's going back to the same place where he had rehab before, and that is just a very nice place. They're excited about that.
Was that determined last night, Dave? Because when I talked to Carol in the morning, that wasn't clear yet.
Well, actually, she told us that because we weren't home last night. It was the night before we talked to her about it. And she said they were saving him a space and trying to, you know, make it work. The only problem is that he has to be released from the hospital, and that's a big question mark right now.
Right.
Correct.
okay. Continue with him. Chris, how's your brother doing?
Better. Every day is a little bit better. So I see him this past weekend, and he obviously is going to be in his back brace for quite some time, but he's able to slowly get along with a cane.
Okay.
So a lot better, and I appreciate you guys still keeping him in your prayers.
Okay. Will do. Yeah, Casey's father-in-law was out of the hospital, and then he was still having some issues, and they found out his kidney disease. Probably going to be on dialysis, and this, although he was out and had thought issues were moving forward, when he found out he had kidney disease, and that definitely set him back, because that's what his dad died of a few years ago. So I don't know. We haven't heard any as far as the prognosis or everything, or how often he's going to be on dialysis, and that's kind of a concern for him. He, you know, they go on a lot of trips, and I think they have a cruise that they're going to take all their kids on and spouses next year. So I'm not sure how that would work out with dialysis, because I think you have to do that typically every other day or something, every few days. So, but anyway, so that's the update on him. Anything else or anything new? Again, I know we've all got multiple prayer lists, but I think this one testimony of Greg and the results that we're seeing here and we've seen in the past, that prayer is important, and it's a value to it's a good thing for us to do, to be in conversation with God, and the other people that are receiving our prayers can feel the presence of God, much like Greg talking about Anna. So it does have an impact, and God is active. So all right, let's spend a moment in prayer to God. So, dear Heavenly Father, we come to you in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, and we just thank you, Father, for the many blessings that you've given us, for the things that you let us see when we can see your action, and your providence is not as hidden as it may have been in Esther, but we can actually see your movement and your actions, and just continue to let us see Father, that, Father. It gives us faith and encouragement as we go through life and with the different things that we encounter. It's such a blessing to us. Father, we lift up all those on our list. We're thankful that Anna's treatment went well. We just ask that you either use that or outright just that bring healing to her. We ask you continue to be with Dick and speed his recovery and strengthen him and keep him in good care. Thankful for the blessings that you've given our family with my daughter and our grandson. We're thankful that you continue to be with us and your presence felt. But we just ask you to be with all those on our list, even those we don't have updates on recently, and Casey's father-in-law, just to help bring healing to him and guidance on the treatments going forward. As Father, you just we're entering into an interesting time in our country, which that's no news to you, but Father, just evil seems to be permeating everywhere. Christians seem to be under attack and censored, and there's even things we can't say on this YouTube recording. So we just ask, come, Holy Father, come. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 So, anything exciting coming up this weekend, guys? Nothing going on?
The heat's going
Joe.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My son Joe's got a big climbing competition he's excited about. He's set that up. And if you've never seen it, you want to see it, Hoosier Heights tomorrow, I think from like 11 to 4. You see young kids and adults doing their thing, climbing the walls.
So what's the contest? How fast you can go up? Or
No, it's just that you can go up. So